Welcome back to Dean Obeidallah Show. We're live here Tuesday, September 3rd. And people on hold, stick around. We're going to take more calls near the bottom of the hour, right to the top of the hour. Right now, very happy to have on. We've been waiting a week because she was too busy. Georgia State Representative Ruwa Romman, who represents House District 97 in Georgia. She's the first Muslim woman and the first Palestinian American elected to the Georgia House. Also a diehard Swiftie, as in Taylor Swift fan. So, Representative, nice to see you, my friend.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm really honored to be talking to you.
Well, it's nice to chat with you, and congratulations on your success, it being making history and what you're doing and getting in there. Tell people a little bit about your story. I mean, you were born in Jordan, you're raised in Georgia. How did you get involved in politics? Like, what interests you enough to say, I want to get involved now, I want to run for office?
Totally. So we moved to the United States when I was 8, specifically to Georgia, where I've been most of my life. There was a brief period where I lived in DC for a few years for school and a little bit of work, and we moved back. And I like to sort of remind people that Georgia is an incredibly diverse state. Me and Marjorie Taylor Greene graduated from the same high school. And so, it's
Wow.
to fully understand the spectrum of of people in our state. But I had been involved in a lot of interfaith work, civic engagement, that kind of thing. And Michelle Nunn and Jason Carter had run for Senate and governor, respectively. And their campaign had come to our campus at Oglethorpe University and said, "Yo, do you guys want to get involved politically?" And I was like, I don't know what that means. But my friends and I went down to headquarters. We did the canvassing where you're door knocking, and this was before we had apps. So you had sort of paper that you had to fill out, and somebody uploaded the data. It was very analog. And I remember literally falling in love with it from the first door knock because I was so firmly I just firmly believe in that moment that we could flip the state and literally change the way that our country functions a door at a time. And I'd gone back to headquarters, and I remember looking around, there was nobody that looked like me, very few people that were frankly as diverse as what I knew our electorate to be. And I started to lean in more into some of the C3 organizations like Georgia Muslim Voter Project to try to get more people civically engaged, just period,
Mhm.
super basic. I was really lucky because this was around the time that Stacey Abrams was also working on the fact that, hey, we can change a lot by expanding our electorate. And so a lot of these organizations started to pop up. We expanded the electorate a lot. And frankly, the way that I ended up running for office was my husband and I had moved back from DC because we're the oldest of four, or I'm the oldest of four, he's the oldest of two, and of three. And so it was really funny because we chose where we lived based on where our families lived. And the Georgia Muslim Voter Project director reached out to me and she said, "Hey, we're doing a training for people interested in running for office. Can you come and give us, watch it, give us feedback, let us know what you think?" And there was a reporter there, and the reporter and I chatted. She was like, "Why should Muslim women be involved?" Again, super excited, told her all about it.
Right.
Don't hear from her. December 23rd, 2021, an article comes out, and the first sentence talks about me thinking about running for office. And I was just like, no, I'm not. But because I've been doing it for 8 years, my phone just, I mean, it went nuts.
Ah,
And so 15 days later, we launched my campaign, and that's how I ended up where I am. So.
that's amazing. That's an amazing story. Now, I read where you talk about being a Southern Arab. And I used to joke about Southern Arabs that you don't have a Southern accent. I've met Arabs and Muslims
Yeah.
who say salam alaikum with a Southern accent, like salam
Oh,
alaikum. Like, and
yeah.
it's very, I'm sure in Georgia you have met them. I did a whole
Oh,
jokes
yeah.
about you might be an Arab redneck if, there's certain things like if you're, I remember what was the silly jokes. Like if your trailer park faces Mecca, like stupid
Yep.
stuff like that. I used to do
Yeah.
those jokes. So what's it like this merging these two cultures coming together?
Yeah, so it's funny because ironically I'm not tired enough, but sometimes you'll hear it. You'll see me say like, "Hey y'all," you'll it's part of my nomenclature. And it's how I grew up. And I always joke that Southerners or Arabs are practically the same. The only difference is the way we drink our tea. We drink it hot, Southerners drink it cold. Both of us drink it way too sweet. And the idea, I joke around that I've got like double the hospitality expectations on my shoulders. The fact that our parents kind of raise us the same way, whether you are a white Southerner or Arab Southerner, it's, God, family, country. And it's just, for me personally, there was never any kind of disconnect or any kind of contradiction to that.
It's remarkable. And look in the America, it's the melting pot of America, isn't it? The idea that people come from all different places And at its best, it really is the e pluribus unum idea from anyone.
Yep.
And the way that it's the cultures when they intersect. I mean, my mom is Sicilian, my dad's Palestinian, and we
Yep.
grew up, the two cultures were completely compatible. And that they were both
Yep.
Mediterranean people, a lot about family, a lot talking very loudly for no apparent reason.
Correct.
Sicilians are very much like that. Arabs are special and that everything's yelling. I'm not really sure why, but just something we do. And so it's kind of remarkable. By the way, where's your family from in Palestine?
So my mom's family is from Khalil, Hebron, and my dad's family is from a village called Suba that unfortunately no longer exists. It was one of the sort of outskirt villages of Jerusalem.
My family's from outside of Bethlehem, Batir, which
Yep.
still exists, although settlers are doing their best to drive them
Yep.
from their land. And
Yep.
that's one because right by the Green Line. The Green Line is a line between Israel formerly and then where the West Bank begins.
Yep.
So it's so close there in the outskirts of Bethlehem that the settlers are really eyeing up their property and everyone, not just theirs. It's not like they're big
Right.
landowners, like all the properties there. And under Netanyahu in the last year, I mean, the confiscation of lands and the violence perpetrated against Palestinians in the West Bank by settlers has been atrocious. It's been off the
Yep.
charts. You probably saw the footage from Jenin, like what's
Yep.
going on there right now as we sit here. Jenin, Hamas is not there. It doesn't. They're tearing the streets up. The Israeli military are tearing the streets up just to collectively punish everyone in Jenin, which is a city in the West Bank for I have no idea what, but they want them to leave, so that's what they're doing to them. It's
Yeah. It's
unreal.
awful. And they're predominantly refugees in Jenin and like still refugees. And I think people don't understand that, yes, we are multiple generations, like at this point, 1 to 2 generations after the Nakba. But the reality is that people are still refugees because literally like replacing everything you've lost takes generations. And it's weird to me when people are like, why are these people still refugees? Like, why are they still holding on? It's like, are you kidding me? My parents got lucky. My grandparents got lucky. The fact that they were able to start over so quickly is a testament to their dedication to trying as hard as they did. But for most people, even the most dedicated of them haven't been able to start over. And so, yeah, to your point, it is collective punishment. The IDF has and continues to occupy much of the West Bank and has enabled a lot of the settlers. Now it's full-on invasion, and it is very scary.
Yeah, and only about 15, 16% of the West Bank is actually controlled by the Palestinian Authority,
Correct.
solely, exclusively. Then about a chunk is both joint, and then about 60% is just controlled by the Israeli military. So even the West Bank is barely a Palestinian enclave at this point, and it's
Yep.
less and less by the day. I'm chatting with Georgia State Representative Ruwa Romman. And so let's talk about the Democratic National Convention, because you were there, and there was at least the chance you were going to speak. Like, I don't know the backstory because I talked to another person who's Palestinian American who said that they talked to her about maybe speaking because she's
Yep.
good friends with Kamala Harris and that kind of stuff. So I had no idea what was going on. I was just hoping someone would speak. So what
Same.
can you share from your situation and how you got to the point, like you drafted a speech and everything? It's not like you just made this all up. Like they're talking to
Correct.
you, someone's talking to you, you draft the speech. So share a little bit, please, of the story.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, shout out to the Uncommitted movement for being able to gain almost 1 million votes around the country to send a message that could not be spun away, right? You can spin away polls, you just can't spin away votes, especially when somebody comes, it's hard to get people out to vote. And so my intention was to stay as far away from the DNC as possible, to be quite honest. I'd gone for a panel with Arab American Institute. In fact, I changed my flight and my hotel 3 times. Like I've got the receipts for people. I was not supposed to be there. And then I got invited to another panel, changed my flight again. And then Uncommitted had been in negotiations for at least 2 months with the DNC about how the DNC would go and what their presence would look like. They had gained delegates, which no one thought they could. And on top of that, they had recruited by the end of the convention over 300 Harris delegates to become ceasefire delegates. So there was this like massive sort of infrastructure that they built of these like party micro influencers that now care about Palestine and a ceasefire and a weapons embargo, or specifically like stopping the weapons. And so the way that it kind of became, the way my name sort of was put forward was that Abbas Tuesday morning, I believe on CNN, one of the Uncommitted leaders had mentioned my name, Abdel Nasser, and Dr. Haj Hassan as publicly as part of a list of names that they had presented to the DNC. They had been presenting names to the DNC. The DNC kept saying, as long as you're not hearing a no, that's a good sign. So they presented more names. And finally they said, we gotta show people that we're doing this. Like people don't know. And so they mentioned us because we were used to media scrutiny and that kind of a feedback loop, I guess. Long story short, there were some members of Congress that wanted to vouch for us, and I drafted a speech. Honestly, I was like watching Obama from my hotel room, like already kind of depressed about everything. And I remember drafting a speech and I sent it to one of the Uncommitted folks and I said, look, if people need an example of a speech, here's a speech. People are asking for it. This is what I would say. And it was pretty much what got leaked on Thursday.
Yeah.
And we're in negotiations. I mean, members of Congress either vouched for me personally by name or in general signed on. I think it was like over 100 elected officials around the country that said, let a Palestinian speak. We had even Jewish organizations say the same thing. We had unions say the same thing. Progressive organizations say the same thing. The basic reality was that it's clear the convention was trying to draw a very big tent. Let that big tent include a Palestinian. If we can't agree on policy, at bare minimum, let's just symbolically show people there's a place for us in this party. And so Wednesday, we were supposed to be on another panel that I got pulled into, and Abbas gets the call, and we're thinking, you know what? Because we saw the family of the late Israeli hostage, and we actually got really, really optimistic when we saw that. We thought any minute now they're going to call and say, all right, let's get you prepped for that stage. And it was actually really, really heart-wrenching because we were in this, like when the call came, I remember Abbas was like, all right, like give us the good news. And the DNC person was like, no, it's a final no. And to add insult to injury, this was, and to be clear, like so many people had been working so hard to try to bridge the divide between voters and the party. And I think for a lot of us, something broke because for 10 something months, we've been doing things right, pulling the right levers, pushing the right buttons. And we couldn't even get a basic symbolic gesture that way. And for a lot of us that have been doing this, we're doing this to save lives. We want to be able to show we're moving the needle. And so Abbas just leaves the panel and goes and starts his sit-in front of the DNC. I finish up the panel and I like go after him. And I remember that night watching Jeff Duncan, who was the Republican lieutenant governor, who oversaw the passage of the heartbeat bill that literally banned abortions in Georgia for after 6 weeks. And I just remember going, my God, a man like that gets a place on that stage and not a single, forget about me for a second, not a single Palestinian was allowed on that stage. And that's honestly what really set me over the edge was the fact that we offered endorsements, we offered to bring the party together, we offered a gift, frankly, right? And they chose not to take it.
And so where does it stand now? And look, for me, it's, there were at the DNC, because there were so many communities represented, that it's an affirmative act not to include certain the community. There was no transgender speaker. And I know there were people upset about that. There's certainly gay speakers, but not transgender. And so you're like, well, they made a choice. They didn't want to showcase someone transgender in front of America from the DNC, even at 7:00 when no one's watching, just live streaming. Like we were watching it here because we were playing some of it. And the same thing, you're going to say, well, a Palestinian voice doesn't matter. And, a lot of us learned about the Israeli hostage and his family from that speaking event. And it was a beautiful speech, and it humanized that young man who tragically was killed by Hamas. And it touches people because they feel like they know him. They saw a picture of him. They heard his mom. And I love that. I think that was great. That's all. I want people to see the same side, the humanity of Palestinians. That's all. Not political, just here's our family telling a story about family in Gaza and what it's going through. So then when they hear about a Palestinian killed by an Israeli missile, it's not like a brown blob, but a human being. And you're like, oh my God, this is horrible. How can we continue to support and let our weapons be used for this kind of stuff? Yep. And if you don't acknowledge the humanity of Palestinians, which for the longest time, I'm older than you, for the longest time, we've not had humanity. It's not been helpful to the situation. It's not brought us closer to any kind of just peace. It's not made anybody safer. How about we go with something new? Both sides have humanity that should be protected. Both sides deserve security. Both sides deserve self-determination as a people. And maybe that will drive us to a just peace where you can actually have a long-term peace and you have to worry about a missile or a militant taking someone's life. But instead, we've had this ridiculousness that's continued. So the DNC, that family that spoke, and they spoke about the Arab, the Palestinian friend of their son and all that was very, very moving. And, my heart breaks for them, what they're going through. And my heart breaks for 15,000 parents of Palestinian children that have been killed that Americans don't even know their name. I talked about the one story about Hind in the car who was killed. And I was in tears on my show talking about it a month or so ago. So I just want us both sides are human beings. Both sides deserve humanity. That's my simple plea. I'm a simple person. Like, this isn't political to me. My family lives in the West Bank. They're coming for them next. I know
Yep.
that. I'm
Yep.
trying to save their
I'm
lives and
here.
other lives. That's all. I'm not here to score points politically. I'm not
Yep.
trying to say, if you don't do this, you're going to suffer. It's not about that. It's literally saving lives. And that's how I come at it. So, so where does it, so now, where are we? Like, where are we in terms of uncommitted? Like, where are you? You're a Democrat. You're a Democratic elected official. Where do you find yourself in Georgia now,
You know,
politically?
it's tough for sure. I know that Uncommitted in the next couple of weeks will be announcing their next steps. For me personally, like I said, I offered my support. The campaign doesn't want it. Nothing frankly changes. I'll be honest with you. My focus has always been about building infrastructure, particularly down ballot. I'm somebody who believes that if you want to, make a change in the world, you got to start with your local community. We've been able to have some really great gains on a state level as it relates to both this issue and just about everything else. So from like tactically and everything that I do my day to day, frankly, not a lot has changed. I think I personally am genuinely very sad because my job would have been so much easier turning out the community for the top of the ticket had I been able to literally point to anything. And people keep pointing to like the self-determination line and all this other stuff. Like we've heard that since Bush, right? Like what people want to hear is a commitment to our laws. That is what people want to hear because that means we have a commitment to stop the bombs, right? It really is that simple. And I remember people were texting me things like, honestly, had I seen you on that stage, not only would I have either endorsed, whatever, I would have started campaigning and donating. Those were the messages that I was getting. And honestly, for me personally, it's not my fault. Like we did everything right. We did everything that I could, but
Right.
really did feel to some extent that I failed them, that I should have had a little more power, should have had a little more influence. But I'm a state representative who hasn't even been elected for 2 whole years, and I'm just now up for reelection. And I have to remind myself this is a long game. I'm trying to remind myself of the positives. Like I said, there are over 300 Harris delegates that are now ceasefire delegates. There's this sort of almost national, I joke it's like a national caucus on like Palestinian issues that I think is beautiful. Incredible organizations, progressive, Black, Asian, Latino, you name it, came out in support of us. That is not going to go away. That is the heart of the Democratic Party. The DNC is always the last to change, but I have been watching this change for at least 11 months now, if not longer. And the future looks bright for us. It's just there's this sense of urgency of we need to save lives now, and that's directly in competition with, hey, we've got this long-term plan. We just have to stick to it.
Well, the one thing I do say, I always look for signs of progress as a way to inspire working harder and getting involved. Things have changed dramatically. You're in your late 20s. I think I know.
I'm 31.
31, something. So it was close, right? I've been following this for a long time. No one ever thought, no one demanded or expected a Palestinian American to speak at DNCs in the past. It was never, and I went back and looked at every DNC speech by the Democratic nominee. And the only one that mentioned the word Palestine was Bill Clinton in 1996 in one line, saying the idea of peace between Palestinians and Israelis. Numerous talked about Israel and security of Israel, not Palestine. So the words by Harris were different, and that talked about Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, security, freedom, and self-determination. To me, her saying those words were meaningful, that she was pressured, or she might believe in it too, don't get me wrong. But what was the most meaningful was the roar of the crowd. Mm-hmm. That's, to me, because if she just said that perfunctory and the people go, okay, next line, so, okay, whatever. The crowd, you were there. Were you in the chamber? Were you in the venue?
To be clear, literally, I never even made it to the floor. I'm telling you, I tried really hard to stay away from it.
My friends who were there,
but
my
it's
friend
true. It's the loudest applause lines.
It was one of the loudest.
Loudest applause lines in the.
So to me, the base is in the right place, and my hope, people in our community, I can't make them do anything, is to say, look, the Democratic Party is the party for you. Look at Donald Trump. He uses Palestinian as a slur. That's what he literally uses, a slur to smear people. Now he's just like a Palestinian. He's just a scumbag, Donald Trump. But our party's moving in the right direction. And it's up to people to vote for Harris or not. That's going to be their choice. But I hope that they support Democrats, knowing this is the party for them. It is embracing. It is a big tent. And the leaders are the last to respond to the grassroots. The grassroots is moving in the right direction. That's how I look at it. How do you view it?
Same thing. I mean, look, I remind folks that the only elected Palestinians on a legislative level, whether it's state or federally, are all Democrats. We are all Democrats. And it's hard. I want to be very clear. Like that, I remember I came back from the DNC and I thought, I mean, what am I doing here? I mean, they won't even let a single Palestinian on the stage. They clearly don't want us around. Like, I need to just quit. And I joke with people sometimes and I say that sometimes, especially on days like that, I turn right to spite. And it's specifically the fact that I never want to give my opposition the satisfaction of driving me out, right?
Mhm.
Especially when, like you said, the majority of people that were there were very supportive. Incredible. I mean, the people that came out and stood with us, the people that supported us in every way they could, the people who leveraged every connection they had to the campaign to push this. And frankly, like I never want to give people the satisfaction of not allowing us to take space in the party. I take that very seriously, particularly because to me, this is the only viable path towards change. Democrats have over the years, consistently more of them, voted against more weapons to Israel. It has not in any way, shape, or form receded over the years. I have a lot of complicated feelings right now about like the, national campaign, but the reality is that Vice President Harris voted against more weapons to Israel as one of her last votes as a senator. And so I'm trying to go back to sort of this objective strategic thinking, but again, for me, what I do, I don't think is very representative, to be quite honest, because I've had 10 years of doing this and I know how this all works. What I've been asking over and over again from the campaign is this is what the community is asking for. Give me a sign you'll respect it. That's all I need. I need to see a sign that says I'm going to follow our laws. And I don't think that's a big ask, but it can go such a long way to helping me get the rest of the people on board.
Certainly. And it's something, I wrote about it for MSNBC a few months ago when Bernie Sanders was just calling for the U.S. to follow the Foreign Security Assistance Act, which mandates that if we're going to provide weaponry to any country, they have to use those weapons consistent with international law and human rights law and international law. And that's all. Just apply the law. And if you're going to tell us there's no human rights violations, well, then that determination's made. But the idea of not looking into it is just ridiculous. Look, the grassroots are moving in the right direction. So, apart from our community, what about in the broader Democratic Party in Georgia? Your state is so vitally important, obviously, on a national level. So, I mean, what can you share more broadly in terms of enthusiasm, excitement, engagement? Is there, what's going on?
I want to be abundantly clear. The headlines we're hearing about engagement are 100% correct. There is absolutely no denying it. Voter registration is up. Volunteers are turning out. Those are all incredibly good signs for a campaign. However, we won the state by 11,780 votes. There are 76,000 registered Muslims in the state of Georgia. We won because we had a beautiful, broad electoral coalition that came out for a singular goal of flipping the state. We cannot flip the state again without those voters. And earlier today, we found out that there's a Republican PAC that is putting out Kamala is pro-Israel to specifically Arab and Muslim voters in Michigan to test out the messaging. Yep. I'm somebody who thinks about things about how I never want to give anybody an in to defeat me in any way, shape, or form. And that has been my concern, is that there's this enthusiasm and it's real and it's beautiful, but I just don't know if it's enough to overcome the close margins. And I don't want us to feel like we got the enthusiasm, we're good. The whole point of having somebody like Harris at the top of the ticket instead of Biden is to give us a chance to fight. And now I'm fighting, and I'm fighting hard for every vote.
Yeah, there was an article in HuffPost and other places today that a political action committee founded by Republicans is running digital ads in Michigan. And it's kind of the reverse thing. If you watch the ad, you don't know it's against Harris. It's just about she stands with Israel. It's all these things. And it's really run by Republicans to try to depress the turnout of Arabs or Muslims or anyone else who is concerned about being 100% saying, I just stand with Israel, without saying, I stand with the Palestinian people and humanity in more generally. So I don't know if it'll work or not, but certainly they have some part of the audience, some part of the community is clearly not going to vote the top of the ticket Democrat. I think some part of the community will. I think if Biden was the nominee, it would have been even harder. Yep. I don't know, for Vice President Harris, I mean, both their parents are immigrants and they're both come from countries that were colonized by Great Britain. I mean, her life experience is much more in line with the life experience of many people in our community. And I think there is a potential, as my friend Linda Sarsour said, you sometimes you pick a candidate that's not perfect, but it's the one you want to negotiate across the table from. And from Trump, there's no negotiation. And that's a part of it. On other things, I'm very happy with Harris. I'm excited about her in other ways in terms of the history that's going to make and her stand on other issues. This one is the one that hurts me, but I don't hold her responsible for Biden's policies, and some people in our community do, and that a vice president doesn't have that. And she called for a ceasefire before President Biden even did in March in Selma, Alabama, on the Bloody Sunday commemoration, which was, in my mind, tying the civil rights movement and this movement together. So, but that's for each person. Like, it's going to be for each person. Like, it's not. And there are certain people in our community that are one issue. There's others who think more globally in the big picture. And some are not political at all. They just they may not have voted before. They were going to vote. Only time will tell. What do you think about down ballot in Georgia? How are things looking there?
Yeah, I mean, again, it goes district by district. I am pretty optimistic about some of them. There are actually two of the top five either flip or protect seats. The margin of victory is smaller than the Arab and or Muslim populations here. So really optimistic for those because those are people who are from those communities. They themselves are not Arab, but they're at least known, they're willing to engage. I've had a lot of optimism, frankly, about that. I'll tell you right now, when we have been door knocking for 5, 6-ish weeks now almost. And
Wow.
the response at the door has been genuinely positive. We have not heard of anyone that is angry with me or upset about down ballots. Even in our WhatsApp groups, there's a lot of people that have a lot of feelings about the top of the ticket, but down ballot, they know what they need to do. And I'm really excited to continue that education because the reality is that candidates like me end up in a pipeline. And those are the people who end up running for higher office, whether it's statewide, Congress. To be clear, I didn't even want to run for office. This is definitely not my
Right.
trajectory, but I've seen my colleagues who, for example, in 2 years are probably going to announce a statewide run. And so the more we build these relationships down ballot, the more we have sort of built trust between each other so that when they are in these higher offices and they are making these decisions, they remember our community as ones that stood with them and ones that when they want to make a decision, they should take into account.
Do you have any concerns if Vice President Harris were not to win, that some other communities that could be hurt by Trump might
Mhm.
blame our community
Yeah.
for right or for wrong? Like if she loses, let's say Michigan or
Yeah.
Georgia, do you have concerns about that?
Yeah, I mean, I like to remind people that only 6% of uncommitted voters were Arab and Muslim. 94% of them were not.
Hmm.
So, even if they want to blame us for that, that's just not true. The reality is that our base is asking for this. I'm
Right.
somebody who, as a candidate, takes responsibility for any missteps that I make. And yeah, that is something that worries me, but I'm going to be really honest with you. I don't think we're going to have time to even have that conversation under Trump. As somebody who was on the front lines against his policies, I think a lot of people, I always tell people this, I say, if there was an alternative viable candidate who is willing to stop the genocide that we are watching unfold, I could understand people being upset about people's choices and how they're moving forward. But the reality is that if you're Palestinian, you really care about this issue, there are no perfect choices or even good choices when it comes to this. There are some by marginally better, but truly, I don't think there's going to be room for advocacy on this if it's Trump. And that's what worries me. It's not even so much that people will scapegoat us. It's what's going to happen when he's in office. There's 100,000 armed militia around the country. It's one thing if we continue to deem their activities illegal if they go after other people, but what if the person in the highest office of the land actually encourages them? What does that look like? What could that mean for us, for our safety, and for, frankly, our ability to move on any issue? I'll tell you this as an elected official, I'm a state rep. I'm not even supposed to deal with international issues. And I'm not going to even have capacity to think about anything other than let's survive another day and let's stop another onslaught of the inevitable insanity that is going to occur.
Yeah, I mean, with Donald Trump, and then he have absolute immunity now, thanks to his Supreme Court, not the Supreme Court, his Supreme Court, and the dangers and the bitterness that this man has, and add to that Project 2025, which they put a lot of stuff in writing. There, it's unreal. So, and last thing, what are the other issues like when you're going door to door and speaking to voters?
Yeah.
Before you came on, what I put out the callers, I talked a lot about, Vice President Harris is doing this reproductive freedom bus tour right now, and how this is such a big issue. But what are the other issues that people have intensity that are really going to make them come out and vote or not vote? So when you're going in Georgia, which is a key state, what are you hearing from people?
Look, I ran to put public service back into politics, and this is basically my stump speech, which is the fact that I wanted to make sure that not only is public education fully funded, but we are investing in it in the future. We spent almost a decade defunding public schools here, and there's a huge hole to fill. We have to make sure that we increase teacher retention, reduce classroom sizes, on things like healthcare, just expand Medicaid for the love of God. Like, I don't even know what it is about our governor who we had Republican leadership voting to expand Medicaid, and they somehow managed to stop it this year. But for me, it's healthcare. Most of our hospitals are now closing in Georgia. Half of our counties don't have an OBGYN. You'll hear a lot about that at the doors. And economic issues, right? Like, how are we lowering costs? A lot of the elderly and those on fixed income are at risk of losing their homes. What are we doing about that? How are we helping alleviate those concerns? I was really proud as a freshman Democrat who's a minority party in a state that is controlled by Republicans across the board. I actually introduced and passed out of the House a bill to designate EMS as an essential service. Those are the day-to-day things that people care about. It ran out of time this year. If I'm reelected, I plan on, introducing it earlier. And so we hear those things at the doors. People are saying, these are things that I think about and I care about, but let me tell you about my day-to-day life and what's impacting it, or my kids or my family or whatever the case may be. That's what brings people out. And I'll tell you this, Democrats need to fall in love, Republicans fall in line. This is a ticket that you can totally fall in love with. I know that Walz was talking about how, Republicans believe in small government, small enough to fit in your, patient room and your classrooms, but not small, that kind of thing. And I really, really, really don't want anything to get in the way of that. I do think that this is a ticket worth supporting. Right now, it's just a matter of, I'm hearing this at the doors. I'm hearing this from community members that I know vote often, and we need them to win in our margin, which was about 100 votes per county. And, I'm trying to sort of merge those two worlds together in order to get to a successful outcome come November.
That's great. And that's the goal here. And before you came on, I was talking about these studies that showed that maternal mortality has gone up in the red states where they have abortion bans. And one of the practical reasons OBGYNs have left the state now over the last 2 years, which affects every woman in the state who wants maternal care. And that's why they're dying. And to me, the GOP are women killers, and they don't care. They really don't. It's controlling women, turning their religion into law. It's so funny. They used to blame, they said Muslims want to impose Sharia law. Like, you're out of your mind. No.
Oh yeah. These are the same. Some of these are the same. Yeah. Some of these are the same people that tried to pass anti-Sharia laws back in like 2014 and 2013. And to your point about maternal mortality, which I always put under Medicaid expansion, is that 90% of those deaths are preventable. 90%. When I heard that the first time, it floored me, because I'm thinking about the kids that lost their mom, the spouse that, lost their wife. Like, it is incredibly daunting to think about what we are doing and how fixable it is. And there are people choosing not to. And it's why I'm like, I don't want more of them in power.
No, we don't. Well, Representative, it was great chatting with you and having you on the show. And if people want to find more about your campaign, what's the website they can go to?
It's RUWA, the number 4, Georgia spelled out. It's our handle.com, all that good stuff. We're pretty consistent on that. That's
great. Well, I wish you the best. And we had, your friend on recently from Georgia, a state senator, and chatting with him.
Josh McLaurin. He told me he was really excited.
Yep. I had him on a couple of times. He became like he became the roving reporter, but he's been replaced by you, tell him. And we'll talk more. And I wish you the best in your own reelection effort.